about you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And my background's a little bit different, and the company I work for is probably different than a lot of the other managers you speak to. So I'm one of the founders of ASM Capital, and ASM stands for American Single Malt, and we are actually a private placement fund that's 100% dedicated to investing in the whiskey industry.
Mhm.
And so my personal background is actually in the whiskey industry. I don't have a traditional finance background. So my dad created his own whiskey company years ago, and he started it really as a hobby. I remember as a kid, when he was making whiskey in our backyard, and then eventually my mom was like, "Hey, you gotta either make this a legitimate thing or quit this hobby." And so he decided to leave his job, and he started a whiskey brand and became the family business. And I worked with the family business for a number of years, and we grew that company, and we ended up exiting the company. So we sold the business to Diageo. Diageo is a publicly traded company. They're the largest spirits company globally in the world. And
Mhm.
so after we sold our company to them, we actually stayed on, the family stayed on with them as a part of a 3-year transition period. And we got to learn a lot from them, obviously, them being the largest player in the space. And once that contract ended, we didn't have a non-compete anymore. We could do whatever we wanted, right? And
Yeah.
I studied finance in school and just kind of had an interest in investing personally. I had a Robinhood account as soon as I could remember. And so I've always had a big interest in investing, and, learned about the private markets and private funds. And so we started initially investing our own family's capital in the alcohol industry into different deals. And then eventually other investors saw what we were doing and wanted to invest alongside of us. So we ended up raising over $150 million from different investors to do one-off deals in the alcohol industry. And building off of that success, we decided to launch our own fund. And so we started working on ASM Capital a few years ago, and we launched it. It's a $250 million private placement fund. We have investors that range everywhere from family offices all the way to RIAs. And we invest in this new category of whiskey that was just ratified, which is called American Single Malt.
Oh, that's so exciting. Going back to your investors, are you actually only working with, let's say, RIAs and firms, or do you work with individuals as well?
So we do work with some individual high net worths. We really
Mhm.
started with that and family offices, so smaller family offices, some
Mhm.
multi-family offices, and that's how we started to gain traction. And then from there, we started to get interest from a couple fund of funds. So you kind of see this trend
Okay.
in the industry now where people are looking at alternatives and real assets, and they're building these fund of funds where they select, asset managers in different niches, and they allocate capital across those different managers. And so there's a few fund of funds that selected us to be their manager for the alcohol part of their fund, right? And
Yeah.
so that's been really interesting. And more recently, we've been working with RIAs. That's been a challenge for us. And I think today's environment and market, there's obviously a lot of pressures kind of going on in the economy. But I think RIAs are starting to get pushback from clients, and that they want more alternatives in their portfolio. The standard 60/40, just doesn't work. And but for us, the challenge has been, it's a long education process. We're a private fund, and we're in a real niche, which is the alcohol industry. But we've done a lot of things to overcome that, and to help make the process easier. So we've got our fund listed on a few platforms, like the SEI Access platform and iCapital. And we work with custodians such as Pershing, and we're working with Charles Schwab now. And so it allows investors or RIAs easy access to get into our fund. And they also know that, those platforms did their due diligence on us. And so it kind of helps check part of that due diligence box as well for these RIAs.
It looks like you guys actually scaled pretty quickly if you just started a few years ago and scaling and getting people on board and getting funds, and people actually seems to believe in you guys. I saw on your LinkedIn that you guys, the fund that you talked about, that was about 4 months ago.
Yeah, so we've launched the fund technically last year is when we started
Okay.
raising capital,
Mhm.
deploying it. And so we did multiple tranches. We're doing our kind of final two tranches, the Q4 of this year and Q1 of next year. And so we've been pretty much every quarter raising capital and deploying it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll cap out at that $250 million target. And, I think a lot of the success it's taken some time, of course, but what's helped is our general partner team. So myself, my father, who's a part of the team, and Scott and our other partners, we come from the industry that we invest in. So,
Yeah.
we're not just outside capital investors trying to take advantage and make money off the alcohol industry. We actually came from the alcohol industry, right? So we
Yeah.
speak the same language as a lot of our clients that we invest in through the fund. And so that helps us with deal flow.
Yeah.
And we have 120 plus years of combined industry experience at the table. So, when investors do their due diligence on us, not only are they investing in the opportunity in the market, but they're investing in the management team, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's really helped. And the other thing that's helped is whiskey as an investment tends to be more fun than like stocks and bonds or
Yeah.
real estate portfolios. So
Yeah.
our due diligence field trips are usually taking investors out to a distillery and letting them talk to the distillers and learn about why they work with ASM, and of course trying some whiskey. And so that's also helped, I think, as
I'm
well with
sure
the
it
capital
softens
raise
the
side.
blow, of course, of course. And it
Yeah.
is exciting instead of talking about stocks and bonds. And usually people that do invest anyway, they've already heard about the stocks, they've heard about the bonds, they've heard about all these other things already. Who's doing whiskey, who's doing liquor. I know when I was a stockbroker, I wasn't talking about a lot of alternative investments. So it's such a big niche to actually diversify yourself. So since you guys grew so quickly, what has been the biggest driver for growth?
Yeah, so I'd say on the capital raising side, it's just education. So not trying to rush folks is really important. We're a totally new investment to them. For some investors, going into alternatives might be new for them in general, let alone a fund manager that specializes in a niche in the alcohol industry, right? That's very,
Mhm.
very new for them. And so
Yeah.
we try not to be salesy or over pushy. We try to be educational first. And so we're kind of an open book. We have
Yeah.
a full data room. We like to give access to that. We like investors to ask questions. And we have multiple members of our team. So from compliance, if they have questions on the offering memorandum or the PPM, they can talk to our compliance side. If they
Mhm.
have nitty gritty questions about the actual investment, and on the whiskey side, hey, how does whiskey investing work? What is actually, we have those whiskey experts that can answer them. So we're very educational focused. And I think that's been well received in the market, and has led to a lot of positive reaction, and really word of mouth as well. Hey, an investor might like us and come in for a small ticket and then tell someone else at a conference to take a look at us. And then, so, I'd say about 20-30% of the investors that we have in our fund have been through referrals. So that's been really, really awesome. And on the industry side, what's helped is, like I mentioned earlier, our team comes from the whiskey industry, right?
Mhm.
And so that's helped. There's other players that invest both on the private side and public side in the alcohol industry, of course. A lot of them tend to be like, big banks that are doing lending opportunities for distilleries,
Yeah.
whereas ours is a private fund solution. But the thing that we hear the most from our investors, or the investments we make in the fund and those clients, the distilleries, the brands, the bottles you see on the shelf behind me,
Mhm.
is that they prefer to work with us over a big bank, right? Because we speak that same language, and we can actually help them, because we've been in their shoes before. We've made mistakes, right, that they're inevitably going to make, and we can help them avoid those mistakes, or connect them with the right people in the market. So that's really how we've grown the business on the industry side as well.
Okay. And then aside from referrals, because you said 30%, which is really, really large, by the way, for such a smaller company, and you guys are just starting off, referrals, 30%, that's very large. So kudos to that. Are you guys doing any
Thank
other
you.
form of marketing, or how are you guys doing acquisition of clients?
Yeah, so we do different industry conferences, alternative investment conferences. We were just at an internal alternative investment conference in the Cayman Islands earlier this week. And
Fun.
what we try and do is, yeah, it's good location. I didn't actually get to go to that one, but
Oh
my
no.
colleagues
Oh
did.
yeah.
So I,
Yeah.
I, I feel like I missed out. But
Right.
yeah, it's we try and get. So we were actually on a panel, a speaking panel. We were a panelist on that conference, and so we were
Mhm.
educating about what we do, and that seems to help add a lot of credibility. We also did a temporary deal with a company called Republic. Republic's an investment platform. It's traditionally started as kind of like an angel investment platform for startups in the tech industry, and it
Mhm.
kind of grew from there. And so now they have all different offerings. You can invest in a Hollywood movie deal, for example. You can invest
Mm.
in an AI startup. And so what it does is it allows everyday investors to get access to a unique, alternative investment opportunity. And they had never done a whiskey fund, so we had partnered with them, and we listed our fund on their platform. And they've done billions of dollars through their platform, so they have a lot of eyeballs, and we were able to raise a decent amount of capital from that relationship as well. So we're always kind of looking for just strategic partners in that way. And I think technology is important. A lot of younger investors are the investors that are pushing for alternatives, and they tend to be more tech focused. And so,
Yeah.
that Republic platform helped with that. We also have the SEI Access platform that was just launched, and we're a member there as well.
Oh, yes. I was going to bring up the technology and how you guys are leveraging that in your business. So it's nice that you guys are on Republic. Anything else when it comes to technology that you guys are leveraging right now?
Yeah, we're doing a couple different things. We'll leverage technology, especially when it comes to events. So we have an in-house marketing person, and what we like to do, because our investment opportunity is in the alcohol industry, it's naturally social and kind of exciting for people.
Yeah.
And so either we'll put on our own event and market it using different social media channels, or putting it in local kind of community areas, notice boards, right? Or we'll actually partner with an RIA who's we're speaking to about potentially bringing their clients into the fund and say, hey, look, I know you're thinking about this, you're doing your due diligence. We'll host an event, a whiskey tasting in your backyard. Invite some of your top clients. There's no pressure. And we'll just have a fun night, social night. We'll give a quick education on what we do. And then the rest of the evening will be kind of more fun and doing whiskey tasting. And
Um,
that obviously works for us because we're a alcohol investment fund, but I think that could work for any advisor, right? If you do something that's social, you have a little piece on what you do and what makes you different, and then you kind of keep the rest of it on relationship building. I
yeah.
think that helps because at the end of the day, um, you know, high net worth individuals, or whether it's an individual investor or a family office, they're still investing based off of trust, right? The numbers have to work, or they're not going to do it anyways, right? So
Yeah.
if the numbers work and they're looking at five different opportunities, the reason they're going to pick you is because they like you, right? They have a good feeling about you and a good relationship. And so that's still really important, I think. And I know a lot of advisors and funds, would rather focus on doing the investment side and not the whining and dining piece. But I think it's still important to have a relationship with folks, and build that trust.
Absolutely. The relationship is the most important part. So, I mean, everybody can almost do similar things if you're thinking about RIAs and how they invest, similar platforms and things like that. But I think many high net worth clients and people in general, we love relationships, people we can trust. And
And in person, right? Like it's not
Mhm.
COVID anymore. So the
Yeah,
days of doing everything on Zoom, people are tired of that.
yeah.
They want to, sure, a phone call, Zoom call here and there is okay.
Mhm.
But, you need to have that personal in-person connection with people as well. I think it's really important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Is there anything you guys are currently struggling with that you're looking forward to improving on in the future?
I think just the education piece is a big one. A
Yeah.
lot of people, a lot of RIAs even didn't have access to alternatives prior, and now with some of the changes that you see in legislation, even with retirement money, right?
Mhm.
IRAs and retirement dollars being able to invest in different alternatives.
Mhm.
There's a huge interest, but there's also a big lack of education
Yeah.
on private deals and private investments, and so. It's a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity. I think the people out there and the funds and investment opportunities out there that are willing to take the time and handhold some of these RIAs or high net worths and educate them are going to come out, on top. And that's really been our strategy. And I think that's why we've been able to stick out even while there's been broader challenges, both in our industry, which is the alcohol industry, and in the broader economy. So I think that education piece that is really, really important.
Is there any other competitors in your field right now?
Yeah, so there's other competitors, other investment funds that are in the alcohol industry. A lot of them are kind of more come from the New York kind of money side, and so they don't know the industry. So we have I think, a competitive advantage. The fact that although we have financial professionals on our team, the bulk of our leadership is made up from the industry that we're in, and that's really important because you want managers in that niche to know the market inside and out, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of other private deals out there. I go to some of these conferences and I speak to some other fund managers that I find really interesting. There's a diamond fund and they invest in
Mm.
diamond mining and it's really interesting. But the investor team has a history in the diamond industry, right? Their family's
Mhm.
been making diamonds for years, right? So I'd rather, if I'm an investor and I'm looking at making an investment in the diamond industry, I'd rather make an investment in the company that's built by people who have a history in the diamond industry, right? They know it inside
Absolutely.
out. It's the same with us, right? We have a history in the alcohol industry. We've built successful businesses and exited them in this industry. And so, we understand things that an outsider just wouldn't understand. And so
Mhm.
I think that's really important. And I think it's exciting for investors because, a lot of these unique alternative kind of private investment deals have historically been, gate kept for larger institutions
Mhm.
and bigger family offices. And now I think it's becoming more acceptable and mainstream for, regular everyday investors up to high net worths and RIA money managers to get access to these alternatives.
Sure. And in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you anticipate this industry going, especially in your niche?
Yeah, so the alcohol industry, and maybe it's helpful if I just kind of give a brief explanation about what we do. Um, so we have a niche in the whiskey industry, and so when whiskey is produced and it comes off the still, a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually clear. It looks like water, so it's the same
Mhm.
consistency and color as vodka or gin would be, right?
Mhm.
These bottles of whiskey behind me, this beautiful brown color of
Yeah.
whiskey. That actually comes from the aging process. So you take the brand new clear whiskey and you put it in a barrel and it sits in that barrel for years and that's where it gets its color and that's also where it gets all of its flavor, right? And
Mhm.
the older the whiskey ages, the better it tastes. And so that's why if you were to go to a liquor store, you're in Colorado, so if you were to go
Mhm.
to like your local liquor store and you looked at the different price points, the older the whiskey is, the more expensive it is. Like a
Yep. Yep.
15-year-old whiskey costs more than a 5-year-old whiskey, right? Because
Yeah.
it tastes better.
Mhm.
And so that's really interesting. The problem is the distilleries and the brands, they don't have time or the capital to wait 5 years, 10 years, 15 years for that inventory to be ready, right? They invest
Mhm.
all this money up front on the equipment, on the labor, and all these costs, right, to
Yeah.
make a product that's not ready for 5, 6, 7 years, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. And so what we do is we kind of act as a bridge. And so in a way, we actually are helping finance their inventory. So we'll go to that distillery, we'll provide the necessary capital to make the whiskey, to make and fill those barrels. And our fund will actually own the physical barrels. So we actually own the raw commodity, these barrels of aging whiskey. And we store it in professional bonded warehouses. We put a comprehensive insurance policy on the asset just in case anything happens to the inventory. And we let it mature. And the longer it matures, the higher the value is, right? Because the
Mhm.
better the flavor profile. And when
Yeah.
it's ready for bottling, when it's 5 years old, we'll actually sell it to those different brands and those distilleries, and our fund makes a profit, right? And
Mhm.
so that's what we do, and it's a really interesting model. It's been happening for well over 100 years. When you look at Scotch barrel trading and investing, and Irish whiskey investing, and the same is true here in the U.S. And so that's the model we have for the fund. I'd say to your question, what's changing? The alcohol industry in general is changing a lot, and so in COVID, we saw tremendous levels of growth. So a lot of people were drinking more alcohol in COVID during the
Yeah.
lockdowns. I think people were being home bartenders, and
Yeah.
after that ended, like the drinking patterns returned to normal. And so there's a lot of big public companies that were left with excess stock because they saw that increase in demand and they kept making more and more stock.
Yeah.
And it's really affected, kind of lower tier categories. And that's where I think the biggest change is. You see younger people drinking less, but they're drinking higher quality liquid. They care more
Mhm.
about premium things and organic and the actual ingredients. And so it's not that they're not drinking altogether. They're drinking less frequently, but when they do drink, they're drinking more premium, right? They want it
Mhm.
to count. And even older generations, with kind of the new Ozempic type, weight loss drugs and stuff
Yeah.
you see in the market, a lot
Yeah.
of them are starting to be more health conscious.
Yeah.
And so, we knew that, and that's why we switched gears. And our fund is specifically targeted to a category called American Single Malt. It's a brand new category of whiskey that just got approved. It's very
Mhm.
different from bourbon. Single malt's a more premium product. It's typically made with non-GMO grain. There's a lot of organic whiskeys in the single malt market, which you don't find in other components of like bourbon or Tennessee whiskey.
Mhm.
And so I think it actually kind of fits that new mold, that new consumer who's looking for a better quality, authentic product, premium ingredients. And that's why we see the average consumer for our product younger than other categories in the space. And so it's something that we've seen. And again, it goes back to that industry experience piece, right? We're from the alcohol industry. We saw those trends happening, and we built our fund to take advantage of that. And I think that's kind of one of the things that sets us apart and makes our fund a really unique opportunity.
And then, like you mentioned, the health part of things. I don't really drink, I'll say, whiskey like that. I don't know
Sure,
too much about. I don't know too much
sure.
about whiskey. But if I am going to drink hard liquor or anything like that, I am also health conscious a little bit more. My friends are too. So
Yeah,
absolutely, if we are going to do it, we do definitely lean towards the healthier version of things. I definitely do see that in myself, and
better
then also my
quality.
group, absolutely, and my friends as well. And then also the older you get, like when you drink cheaper liquor, it's harder to wake up the next morning.
You feel it the next day, right?
You
Yeah, like
feel it for
in
sure.
college, you can get the cheap shots and all that stuff. But as you get older, those hangovers get
Hmm.
worse. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think the society realizes that, and things are changing. And if you look, alcohol is different price categories. And so when you go to the liquor store, right, there's
Mhm.
the term top shelf, right? Top
Yeah.
shelf tends to be the most expensive premium products, and the bottom shelf is kind of your cheap stuff. Well, if you look at the trends in the industry, the stuff near the bottom, their sales are going down year on year. If you look at the
Mhm.
stuff near the top, the more expensive stuff, their sales are going up year on year. So we
Mhm.
have this premiumization trend taking hold in the alcohol industry, and single malt and American single malt fits that premium category. And I think a lot of people are trying to ignore it or brush it aside, but I don't see these trends changing, and that's why we wanted to double down and focus on a category that's growing. And American single malt is actually the fastest growing subcategory of distilled spirits. So it's growing at a CAGR of over 10% year on year, whereas you have bottom shelf blended whiskey declining at a rate of 4 or 5% a year, right? And
Mhm.
so where would you rather invest in a trend or a category that's growing or categories that's shrinking, right? I
Yeah.
think the answer is clear. And the interesting thing about us is that we saw that trend before it happened. We started working on this and we formed the fund even ahead of those high level changes.
How would you compare that to the Scottish whiskies? Because I think people talk so highly of the
Yeah,
Scottish whiskies, about the quality, the hype
sure.
around it. So now that the Americans are doing their own thing, how would you compare qualities now?
Yeah, it's not that American single malt is trying to get rid of single malt Scotch. It's always going
Yeah.
to be there. I love single malt Scotch. I've got some
Mhm.
in my home bar,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't realize that Irish whiskey was actually the main whiskey for well over 100 years before Scotch kind of took its throne. And so Irish
Mhm.
single malt, even to this day, is very prominent worldwide. Obviously, single malt Scotch, and then recently, starting in the late 90s, but really taking hold in the 2000s, was Japanese single malt. And Japanese single malt became very popular in the US. And
Mhm.
you had the merger of Jim Beam and
Mhm.
Suntory over in Japan, and that took it global. And so, all we're trying to do and what the American single malt category is trying to do is being that same conversation. So, Americans have really fantastic whiskey. We have great master distillers. We have fantastic grain grown here in the US. A lot of people don't realize all Scotch starts its life off in a used American bourbon barrel. So that we actually ship our old barrels to Scotland, and that's what they age their whiskey in. And so we've got great local products here to make whiskey. And distillers have actually been making single malt whiskey in America for decades. The problem was there was never legal legislation behind it. And so in spirits, you need to have a defined category by the TTB. And the TTB is a division of the ATF that oversees the alcohol industry. And there was never that category. So it made it difficult to have direction on the rules and what's the legal status of an American single malt. You couldn't really export it. It was tough to label it. And all of that changed about 3 years ago after a lot of lobbying efforts from the industry. The government finally decided that it was going to start working on a category. And that category actually got passed into legislation January of this year. So January 2025, it became an official new category. The whole market has been really excited about it. You've seen a lot of big brands in the US that previously didn't have a single malt. Now that we have that legislation, they've released single malt. So Jack Daniels is a big brand everyone knows. Jack Daniels now has an American single malt, right? Off the back of this legislation. So it's been really exciting. The quality compares similarly to single malt Scotch. But what's interesting is America geographically is such a big country that the different regions, like Texas is very hot. That makes a very different smoky flavored whiskey versus like Kentucky, which is more mild and going to give you a more kind of fruity undertoned single malt whiskey, right? So we have these different regions that make American single malt unique. And again, we're not here to push single malt Scotch away or Japanese single malt away. We just want to be in the same level of discussion and say, hey, you know what? America can make single malt whiskey just as good as these other guys and should be in that same kind of room with them.
Yeah. You just want the respect as well. I mean, you sound very patriotic when you were talking about that.
Yeah. Well, that's my passion for sure. That's why we do it.
For sure. And then let's say one piece of advice you would give someone, let's say they have the finance background, they have a niche in their mind, if they want to pursue it, they don't know where to start. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not easy, right? If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. I think it comes down to, would you put your own money into that investment opportunity, right? Because I see a lot of, and again, I don't have a traditional finance background. I studied it in school, but my career has been in the spirits industry and up until we launched this fund. But I see a lot of different investment opportunities, whether it be at conferences or in the news. And, I don't get the sense that the people behind those opportunities even believe in what they're doing, right? And so I think a good litmus test would be, would you put your own money in it? And would you put your mom and your grandmother's money into that opportunity? If you wouldn't, then you probably shouldn't, move forward with it, right? But if you actually really believe in it enough to put your own money or your family's money into it, then I think you have something, right? And it's just a matter of trial and error and getting people to believe your story. But if you believe it enough to put your own money in, you're more likely to get someone else to believe in you and give you their money to invest, right? So I think that belief and that conviction is priority number one. And number two, I would say is learn from other people who have done it, right? Like, I'm not an expert in the industry. I just started reaching out to people on LinkedIn from the finance industry who have raised capital. And I started, buying even $200-300, you can be an attendee to a conference, right? And so go and talk to the people who have that experience, who have raised capital for their own investment opportunity, and learn from them, right? That's the best way that you're going to learn. And if you can, hire them. If you can't, just talk to them or buy them a coffee or buy them a drink and learn from them, right? I think those are really the two most important things.
Yeah. So network and be confident in what you're doing.
That's right.
Explore, talk to people, make friends, because there is imposter syndrome when you're doing something new, especially if you are the one starting it from the ground up. I mean, for you, you kind of have people that know a little bit more about the industry. You grew up in that industry, so you have the knowledge already. You just needed to implement it in a different way, which is amazing. But then if someone doesn't have that knowledge already, it's not like that imposter syndrome come in just.
No, don't.
Yeah.
And everything that was started by someone who, who might not have had a background in that, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, like a good real world example, obviously a controversial figure, but Elon Musk didn't know anything about rockets before he started a space company, right? But
Yeah.
he figured it out along the way, right? So
Yeah.
I think even if you don't have that background there, you can learn. You
Hmm.
can learn, and the best way is to start. And you're going to have mistakes along the way, and you're going to have failures along the way, and you learn from those. So
Yeah. Fail quickly. That's the
yeah,
best way to that's the best way
yeah.
to do it, for sure, for sure. And if someone is looking for you guys, they want more information, where do they find you?
Yeah, so real easy. Take a look at our website. You can reach out there. It's asm.capital. So instead of .com, it's .capital.
Mhm.
And there's like a get in touch button there. It goes straight to our inbox. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well, Hunter Robillard, and happy to link that too.
Well, Hunter, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. I loved learning about the whiskey industry and what you guys are up to and growing so rapidly as well. That's really impressive and really motivational, for myself included, and I'm
Great.
sure anyone else that would be listening.